There's a very important topic in section 5.7 that I want you to be aware of and be able to do, and that is how we go about changing a standard form function, quadratic function in standard form, and changing it into vertex form. I think we would all agree that if we had to graph, if we had to choose the two to use for graphing purposes, we would prefer to graph out of vertex form. So in certain cases, it's easy enough to change a standard form function into vertex form, and I want to show you that process with this video. So once again, this, in case you forgot, this is what vertex form looks like, and in this form, the numbers that would be in place of h and k represent the vertex of the parabola. So let me go through some examples for homework. You're doing these two problems on page 281, and these two examples match up pretty closely with those. So here's how changing from standard form to vertex form works. First of all, you identify the fact that A in standard form is 1, so that means A in vertex form obviously should also be 1. And you also notice in vertex form we have this quantity squared. Well, here's how we come up with the x and the h and the sign inside this set of parentheses. The x is really just thinking of the square root of x squared from standard form. The square root of x squared is just x. Whatever sign is in front of the linear term in standard form will come down and be a part of the parentheses. That'll be the sign inside your parentheses. Now this h number that you see in vertex form, the way we come up with that is we take the linear coefficient in standard form and divide it by 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Okay, and remember that is all that quantity is squared. So we've got this part of our vertex form. We have a, which is 1, times the quantity x minus 5 squared. Okay, and now let's take a look at how we come up with this k number. And here's how we do that. Whatever you came up with for h, in this case, it really doesn't matter if you think of it as -5 or +5, because either way, you're going to square that number, and the result of squaring either of those numbers is 25. Okay, so that result, 25, I want you just to go up to your standard form and just tack it on to the end of standard form using subtraction. You always subtract this h number squared from your standard form. And now these two constants at the end of this equation, -2 minus 25, you put those together and you get -27. And so we now have this original standard form that was in blue is now written in vertex form, which is here. Okay, and that's how it works. So this may take a little bit of practice, but I think you should be able to do fine with it after you've done it a few times. All right, so let's take a look at letter B. We'll set it up the same way. A is 1. So once again, when I do vertex form, A is understood to be 1. So obviously I don't write 1 times this quantity. It's understood to be 1. Okay, so what goes in the parentheses? Well, I'm going to do the square root of x squared. I'm going to bring down this sign, whatever it is, in front of the linear term. And then this linear term will always be divided by 2. In this case, 5 divided by 2, 5 over 2. Okay, so remember how we get the k part of vertex form? We square this number that we just came up with in our parentheses. If you raise 5 over 2 to the second power, you get 25 over 4. You just square both the numbers, and we subtract that number. Oh, sorry about that. 25 over 4. We always subtract that. Just go to the end of your standard form and just put a subtraction at the end and subtract your number h squared. Okay, so now we're going to put these two together. Now this is going to involve converting 3 into a fraction that has a denominator of 4, but that's not too bad. That's just 12 over 4. So if we think of 3 as 12 fourths, so 12 fourths minus 25 fourths is negative 13 fourths. So there's our vertex form. And if we did have to identify the vertex, just for review purposes, the vertex would be negative 5 halves, negative 13 fourths. And for our previous example, letter A, the vertex would be 5, negative 27. All right, so that's how you change standard form to vertex form. Okay, so 2 of your homework problems are just slightly different, and the thing that makes them different is A, in this case, is negative 1. So I want to show you how it's very similar, but just slightly different in the approach that we take to change this into vertex form. So the first thing I'm going to do is change this so that it is in more familiar terms, so that it does look like a positive on the right side. And the way I'm going to do that is just mathematically, I'm going to multiply both sides of this equation by negative 1. But the effect is really just to change all of the signs. Just think about every individual number or term being either multiplied or divided by negative 1, and negatives become positives, positives become negatives. Okay, so this is just like a temporary step to enable us to go through our procedure that I showed you on the previous slide. All right, so let's do our parentheses. This is the square root of x squared, and minus comes down. And then we always divide by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. All right, so this number squared, which would be 16, I'm going to go up to my standard form right above, and I'm going to subtract 16, 4 squared. And then I put these two constants together. 10 minus 16 is negative 6. Well, standard form, or vertex form, excuse me, obviously has positive y. So let's put it back. Let's make this become positive. So once again, we're going to multiply by negative 1. It's going to make this positive. So there are really only 2 numbers in vertex form when you're doing this multiplication. There are only 2 numbers that you're actually multiplying. You're multiplying the A. A right now is positive 1, but when I multiply it by negative 1, of course, it becomes negative. Nothing in the parentheses changes. So the only thing that you're really multiplying or dividing by negative 1 in this case will be this A number and then this constant, or it's actually the K of vertex form. So negative 6 is going to become positive, or plus 6. Okay, so that is our final vertex form. But I just wanted to show you, and you're going to run into this on these 2 problems where A is negative 1. So just do this little temporary setup, moving the negative, which really amounts to changing all the signs. Go through the same routine that I showed you earlier, and then just put the negative sign back. All right, so A will be negative, and then whatever this K number is, it will change signs. Nothing changes inside the parentheses. And so if I did have to identify the vertex, it would be the point 4, 6. Okay, so that is all we're going to cover in section 5.7, the topic of changing standard form quadratic equations into vertex form.